Aristotle, on the soul. Translated by Hippocrates G. Apostle and Lloyd P. Gerson. From Aristotle, Selected Works, 3rd edition. Printed by the Peripatetic Press. Book 1. Chapter 1. We regard knowing to be noble and honorable, and one kind of it to be more so than another, either by virtue of its accuracy, or because its objects are better and more wonderful. And for both these reasons, it is reasonable that we should give a primary place to the inquiry concerning the soul. It is thought, too, that the knowledge of the soul contributes greatly to every kind of truth, and especially to that about nature. For the soul is, as it were, the principle of animals. Now we seek to investigate and to know, first, both the nature and the substance of the soul, and, secondly, its attributes, some of which are thought to be proper attributes of the soul, while others are thought to belong to the soul, belong through the soul to animals also. But to attain any conviction concerning the soul is in every way one of the most difficult things. For although the inquiry here is common to that in many other sciences also, I mean the inquiry into the substance and the whatness of the subject, one might think that there is some one method applicable to every subject whose substance we wish to know, as in the case of proper attributes, which are known by the method of demonstration. If so, one should inquire what that method is. But if there is not some one and a common method of coming to know the whatness of things, the matter becomes even more difficult, for we would then have to determine the manner of inquiry to be used for each subject. And even if it were evident what that manner is, whether a demonstration or division or some other method, we are still faced with many problems and uncertainties as to what we should use as starting points in the inquiry, for different sciences proceed from different principles, as in the case of numbers and of planes. Perhaps it is necessary to determine the genus under which the soul falls, and the whatness of the soul, that is, whether it is a this and a substance, or a quality, or a quantity, or falls under some other of the categories already distinguished. And further, whether it is one of those things which exist potentially, or it is rather an actuality, for this makes no small difference. Again, we should consider if the soul is divisible into parts or has no parts, and whether every kind of soul is homogeneous or not, and if not homogeneous, whether souls differ in species or in genus. For those who nowadays discuss and make inquiries about the soul seem to limit their investigations to the human soul. We should be careful to not overlook the problem of whether there is a single definition for the soul, such as the soul of an animal, or a different definition for each, e.g. a horse, a dog, a man, and a god, wherein an animal taken universally is either non-existent or posterior, and similarly for anything which might have a common predicate. Again, if there are not many souls, but only parts of a soul in each thing, there is the problem of whether the inquiry into the whole soul should proceed or follow into the parts of it. And with regard to the parts, too, it is difficult to determine which of them are by their nature distinct from one another. There is also the problem of whether the inquiry into the parts should proceed or follow that into their functions, e.g., whether the inquiry into the intellect should proceed or follow that into thinking as an activity, whether the inquiry into the sentient part should proceed or follow that into sensing as an activity, and similarly in the case of the other parts. And if the inquiry into the functions should precede that into the parts, one might still raise the problem whether the inquiry into the objects to which those functions are directed should precede that of the corresponding parts, whether the sensible object should be sought before the sentient part of the soul, and whether the object of thought should be sought before the thinking part. It seems that not only is the knowledge of a substance's whatness useful to the investigation of the causes or the attributes of that substance, as in mathematics, in which knowledge of the whatness of straightness and curvature and a line and a plane are useful in perceiving the number of right angles to which the sum of the triangle's angles is equal. But conversely, knowledge of the attributes of the substance of a thing contributes a considerable part to the knowledge of the whatness of that substance. For whenever we can give an account of all or most of the obvious attributes of a thing, we are in the best position to formulate its substance. For the starting point of every demonstration is the whatness of a thing. So if a definition fails to make us know by inference those attributes or even facilitate a conjecture about them, then clearly it is in every case so stated as to be dialectical or empty. The attributes of the soul too give rise to a problem. Are the attributes of that which has the soul also? Or is there any one of them which is proper to the soul? The problem must be settled, but it is not easy. Now, in most cases, it appears that such attributes cannot exist unless the body is being affected or is acting as in anger, courage, desire, and sensation in general. Thinking, most of all, seems to be proper to the soul, but if this, too, is a species of imagination, or incapable of existing without imagination, then it too could not exist without a body. Accordingly, if there is any function or affection of the soul proper to the soul, then the soul can be separated from the body. But if no function or affection is proper to the soul could not be separated from the body, but would be just like the straight. The straight qua straight has many attributes, e.g. it touches a bronze sphere at a point, but the straight, as something separated in existence from a body, cannot so touch it. For it is inseparable from a body, since it exists always with the body. Now, it seems that all the attributes of the soul, e.g. temper, good temper, fear, pity, courage, also gladness and love and hate, exist with the body. For the body is being affected simultaneously with these. This is indicated by the fact that sometimes when strong or striking affections occur, we are not at the same time irritated or afraid, but at times when the affections are weak or obscure, we are moved and the body is agitated in a manner similar to that when we are angry. Again, a more evident example is the fact that we become afraid, even if there is no external cause of fear. If such be the case, it is clear that the attributes of the soul are things whose formulae includes matter. So corresponding definitions will be as follows. Anger, for instance, is a certain motion of such a body or bodily part or faculty of that body caused by such and such a mover for the sake of such and such an end. And because of these facts, it becomes evident that it belongs to the physicist to investigate the soul, every kind of soul or such, which is inseparable from a body. Accordingly, a physicist and a dialectician would define each attribute of such a soul in a different way. For instance, in stating what anger is, the dialectician would say that it is a desire to retaliate by causing pain or something of this sort, whereas a physicist would say that it is the rise in temperature of the blood or heat around the heart. Thus, the latter would state the matter, the former would state the form in the formula. For the formula is the form of the thing, but that form must be in such and such a matter if it is to exist. It is like the case of a house. Its formula is such as this, a covering which tends to prevent its contents from being destroyed by wind or rain or scorching heat. But another would speak of it as being stones and bricks and timber. Still another would speak of it as being the form in these materials for the sake of such and such an end. Which of the above three definitions will the physicist give? Is it the one concerned with the matter but overlooks the formula, or the one concerned with the formula only? Is it not rather the one which includes both the matter and the formula? Then what should we call each of the other two thinkers? Should we not say that there is no scientist who is concerned only with the attributes of matter, which are inseparable, and is concerned with them qua separable? But that is the physicist who is concerned with all the attributes, which are functions or attributes of such and such a body or matter, and of the things which are investigated, not qua such attributes. That it is the artist who is concerned with some attributes, e.g. the carpenter or the physician, if those things happen to be works of art. That is the mathematician who is concerned with inseparable attributes, but by abstraction and not qua attributes as of such and such a body. And that is the first philosopher who is concerned with things insofar as they are separate. But let's return to the point from which we just digressed. We were saying that the attributes of the soul, qua such attributes, as in the case of temper and fear, are inseparable from the physical matter of animals, and are not like a line or plane. Chapter 2. In our inquiry into the soul, we must, while going over the difficulties which should precede their solution, consider also the doctrines of those before us who had something to say concerning the soul, in order that we may accept whatever was stated well, but guard ourselves against anything which was not stated well. The starting point of our inquiry is to lay down before us those things which are particularly thought to belong to the soul by virtue of its nature. Now, that which is animate was thought to differ from most of all from that which is inanimate in two ways, by having self-motion and by sensing. From our predecessors, too, these two are mainly the things about the soul which were handed down to us. Some declare that the soul is particularly and primarily that which causes motion, and thinking that no thing which is not itself in motion can cause another thing to be in motion, they came to the belief that the soul is a thing in motion. In view of this, Democritus asserted that the soul is a sort of fire and hot. For of the infinite kinds of shapes and atoms, those which are spherical he called fire and soul, these being the so-called motes in the air which appear in the sunbeams entering through windows. And he said that all these seeds, i.e. shapes and atoms, are the elements of the whole of nature. Leucippus, too, speaks similarly. But that those of them which are spherical are souls, because elements of such shape are most capable of passing through openings, and moving all other things by being themselves in motion. These thinkers regard soul to be that which furnishes animals with motion, and in view of this they regard breathing as being the definition of living. For they think, after the surrounding air presses upon the bodies of animals and forces out atomic shapes, which furnish the animals with motion, because those shapes are never at rest, other such shapes from outside come to the aid by entering the body during respiration. and these prevent the escape of the shapes already in the bodies by compression and solidification, and animals live as long as they are able to do this. What the Pythagoreans have said, too, seems to amount to the same thought, for some of them identify the soul with the motes in the air, others that which move these motes. And these motes were referred to because they appear to be continually in motion, even when the air is completely calm. The thinking of those who say that the soul is that which moves itself, too, amounts to the same thing. For these thinkers seem to believe that motion is most appropriate to the soul, and that while all other things are moved by the soul is moved by itself, and it does so because they observe nothing moving something else which is not itself in motion. Similarly, Anaxagoras and all others who declare that intelligence caused the universe to be in motion say that it is the soul which moves other things. But Anaxagoras does not speak altogether like Democritus. The latter declares that the soul and the intellect are simply the same, for according to him what is true is the same as what appears to be. And for this reason he regards Homer's phrase, "Hector lay thinking other thoughts," as well put. He does not, however, treat the intellect as a certain faculty concerned with truth, but says merely that the soul and the intellect are the same. Anaxagoras speaks less clearly about these matters. In many places he says that intelligence is the cause of beauty and rightness. In other places he says that it is the soul, for it exists in all animals, great and small, worthy of honor and less honorable. But the so-called intellect, and spoken of with respect to prudence, does not appear to belong alike to all animals, not even to all men. Then, those who consider the soul from the point of view of the motion of animate things regarded it as the most capable of causing motion. But those who considered it from the point of view of knowing or sensation of the things placed among the principles, some positing these to be many, but others only one, the soul itself. Thus Empedocles regarded the soul as being composed of all the kinds of elements, and each of these being a soul. He says, by earth we see earth, water, water, by ether, ether divine, by fire, destructive fire, by love, love, and by strife, and strife, by bitter strife. In the same manner, Plato in the Timaeus constructs the soul out of elements, for according to him, like is known by like, and things are composed of principles. In my treatise on philosophy, too, a similar description of Plato's view is given. Animal itself is composed of the idea of one itself, and primary length, and of the primary length, the primary breadth, the primary depth, and the rest are composed in a similar manner. In still another way, he regards the intellect as the one, knowledge is two, for this is arrived at in one way only. Opinion as the number of the plane, and sensations as the number of the solid. For numbers, according to him, are the forms themselves and principles of other things, and they are composed of elements, and things are apprehended, some by the intellect, others by knowledge, others by opinion, and others by sensation. And the above numbers are the forms of things. And since the soul was thought to be capable of causing motion and of knowing, some thinkers combined these two, declare the soul as a number moving itself. But thinkers differ as to what the principles of the soul are, and how many of them there are, especially between those who posit them as being corporeal and those who posit them as being incorporeal. And these differ from what those who combine these two and declare that the principles are of two kinds, And there are differences as to the number of principles also. For some speak of only one, others many, of many. The accounts they give of the soul, too, follow from the position they take with respect to the principles, but they regard, not without good reason, the thing whose nature is to cause motion, as being among the primary. Thus, some are of the opinion that the soul is fire, for fire, too, is thought to be composed of the finest particles, and to be the most incorporeal of the elements. Besides, it is in the primary sense, both in motion and that which moves other things, according to these thinkers. Democritus speaks even more precisely than the others by stating the cause of each of the two traits of the soul just mentioned. For he says that the soul is the same as the intellect, that is, composed of the primary and indivisible bodies, and that it can cause motion because of the smallness and the shape of the particles, and of the fact that of the various shapes, the spherical is the most easily moved, and that such is both the intellect and fire. Anaxagoras seems to speak of the soul and intelligence as being different, as we have already stated, but he treats them as if they were one in nature, except that he posits intelligence as being the highest principle of all things. At any rate, he says that, of all things, intelligence alone is simple, unblended, and pure. Yet in saying that intelligence set the universe in motion, he attributes both knowing and moving other things to the same principle. Thales, too, judging from the anecdotes related of him, seems to have regarded the soul as something which can cause motion, if indeed he said that the lodestone possesses soul, for it moves iron. Diogenes, like some others, thinking that air is composed of the finest particles and is a principle, regards the soul as being air. And for this reason he thinks that the soul both knows and causes motion, for he thinks that insofar as it is first, i.e. a principle, and the other things are composed of it knows, but that insofar as its particles are the most fine, it can cause motion. Heraclitus asserts that the principle is soul, if indeed it is an exhalation from which the other things are composed, that it is the most incorporeal, and always in a state of flux, and that what is in motion is known by a thing in motion. Both he and many other thinkers think that all things are in motion. Alcmaeon, too, seems to regard the soul in about the same way as these thinkers, for he asserts that the soul is immortal because it seems to be like immortal things, and that it possesses immortality by being always in motion. For according to him, all divine things, the moon, the sun, the stars, and the whole heaven, are in a continuous motion. Of the rather crude thinkers like Hippo, some went as far as to declare that soul is water. They seem to have been persuaded by the fact that the seed of all animals is moist, for Hippo refutes those who assert that the soul is blood by pointing out that the seed is not blood, but is the primary soul. Others, like Critias, regarding sensation to be most appropriate to the soul, declare that the soul is blood and that sensation occurs because of the nature of blood. Thus, each of the elements found its advocate, except earth, and no one declared the soul to be earth, unless it be anyone who said that the soul is composed of all the elements, or that every element is a soul. Now, all thinkers define the soul by three things, so to say, motion, sensation, and incorporeality. And each of these is referred to the principles. It is in view of this that even those who using about the same language define it as knowing posit it to be with one exception, either an element or composed of elements. For they say that like is known by like, and that since the soul knows all things, it consists of all the principles. Accordingly, those who assert that there is only one cause or one element, such as fire or air, posit the soul too to be one. But those who assert that the principles are many posit the soul too to be many. Anaxagoras alone says that intelligence cannot be affected, and that it has nothing in common with any of the other things. But how intelligence, if it is such, will know, and through what cause? He did not say anything, nor is it evident from his writings. Again, those who posit contraries among the principles say that the soul too consists of contraries. And similarly, those who posit one of two contraries, such as the hot or the cold, or some other such thing, posit the soul to be that contrary. And in view of this, these thinkers appeal to language for support of their views. Thus, those who posit the hot say it is because of this principle and the word boil that the word living is used. There is, as a side note, the Greek words are similar, but I don't know how to pronounce them. Continuing. And those who posit cold, that it is because of inhaling the word, insert Greek word, cooling, that the word, insert Greek word, soul, is used. The above, then, are doctrines concerning which were handed down to us, and the reasons for which they were so held. I apologize, as a reader, for messing up, but I do this basically for my own good, and I post it on YouTube for anyone who would like to have someone to read with, who's not like LibriVox. I could give my thoughts on these, I guess, as I read through them for philosophies, and I guess I will. I really like Aristotle's philosophies. I find them to be very interesting, and I think this particular book written by Aristotle, or this book of De Anima, on the soul, it is often quoted when researching about, when books write about, or researchers talk about pre-Socratic philosophers, since I don't think much or any of their writings have really survived the passing of time. But here he sums up, as far as we can know pretty fairly, all of these different philosophies, including his own teacher Plato, in which we have that book, the Timaeus. And I think it's fair to look at the things which others have thought beforehand, and you can see the good elements of it and reject the bad elements like he suggested. So it's important to look back in time, because that's how we build knowledge on top of each other, which is a very uncommon or very unpopular view these days ever since the modern period of philosophy. Because now that modern thought is, let's toss out all the old stuff, we need to make a new thought for this new world. Here, I think it's a good example of showing you can look through it, you can think about that, and you can toss out the bad stuff and leave the good stuff. Thoughts aren't invalidated just because they're old, or as some would say, outdated. Well, thank you for listening.